Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, February 6, 2025, and I am so grateful to every one of you for being here. I've been looking forward to this all week, that you set aside the time so that we could study together. I really appreciate it. Vayar Yisrael es hayad hagdola. When God split the Red Sea, the famous miracle, which is the centerpiece of our Torah portion this week of Beshalach. When the Jewish people saw this incredible miracle that no one had ever obviously imagined was even possible, Vayar Yisrael es hayad hagdolah, the Jewish people saw the great hand of God. What does it mean, the great hand of God? Well, obviously, God doesn't have a hand like this with 5 fingers and skin and stuff like this. Obviously, there's something about God that was revealed to the Jewish people, and it is revealed using the words Yad Hagdolah, the great hand. What is that? And whatever answer you're going to give me to what that is, the second question is, how is that different than what happened in Egypt just a week earlier, which was done by God, and the exodus from Egypt was done by God, is described in last week's Torah portion, and we say this at the Seder night in the Haggadah as Yad HaChazaka, the mighty hand. What's the difference between a great hand and a mighty hand? The Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, gives the following answer. The great hand is a hand that is very strong. Excuse me, that's not what I meant to say. Yad HaChazaka, I want to start there. Yad HaChazaka, the mighty hand. The mighty hand that took the Jews out of Egypt is very strong. Because, of course, there was a lot of pressure not to let the Jews go free. So it required extreme might on the part of God to wrench the Jews free from Egypt. So a mighty hand, like God exhibited in Egypt, is very strong, but it does not uplift anyone else. It doesn't cause anyone else to be transformed. But Yad Hagdolah, the great hand, is a hand that allows the one who sees it to become greater. The effect of seeing a great hand is internalized, and it transforms the one who sees it. It elevates the one who sees it. In Egypt, the Jews were terribly challenged. And God was active. As we saw in last week's Torah portion and the Torah portion before that, God was active, God was performing miracles. The Jewish people were passive. The Jewish people were waiting for God to provide enough miracles that Pharaoh would let them go, which happened. And of course, God's miracles in Egypt caused a reaction among the Egyptians. But the Jews remained the same. They were the same people they were before. But at Kriyas Yamsuf, at the splitting of the Red Sea, the Jews were challenged. But it was the Jewish people who took the initiative. Vayava'u b'nei Yisrael b'soch hayam bayabasha. The Jewish people jumped into the water. We discussed this earlier this week. It is the Jewish people who took the initiative that brought about, that led to God's miracle of splitting the sea with a great hand. And the Jewish people were elevated. The Jewish people had a higher, deeper insight into God because they had become elevated, because they are the ones who initiated this miracle. And because they initiated this miracle, the Jewish people had a greater awareness of God's presence. And they were elevated to the level of prophets, every single person there. Our sages tell us every single person who witnessed the splitting of the Red Sea had an insight into God, had an encounter with God that was on the level of prophecy. And this is a really important practical lesson for us because challenges come our way. We may not want them to, but they do. And the reason challenges come our way, we discussed this also this week, is to elicit our growth, to elevate us. Of course, often we don't see it, and we would never suggest this to someone who is going through something because that would be cruel and insensitive, but it is nonetheless true. Years ago, I once visited with a woman with whom I'm very close. And she was going through a bitter and difficult challenge in her life. And she said to me with remarkable insight and honesty, she said to me, I understand what I am supposed to learn from this. Wow. That's the effect of God's great hand, the Yad HaChazaka, to be elevated as a result of our actions. That did not happen at the Exodus itself, but it did happen at the splitting of the Red Sea. We have a formula in our prayers. We begin every Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, the standing prayer. That's the main prayer that we say to God. Our primary prayer, prayer par excellence. Every Amidah begins with this formula. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, Elokeinu Velokei Avosenu. You are our God, and you're the God of our forefathers, our ancestors. Now, this formula has two components, as I hope to explain to you. And I think that the model on which these two components are built, the model for the way we begin every Amidah, is the prayer Az Yashir. This is the famous song of praise sung in our Torah portion by the Jewish people after they experience God splitting the sea, taking them across in dry land, bringing the water back down upon the Egyptian army. They are saved. Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael Sashir Azos. Then Moshe and the Jewish people sang this song. Then the Jewish people, Moshe and the Jewish people, sang this song. Clearly, that's what the verse means to say. The event happened, and after the event happened, they sang this song in response to this event. Now, although that's obviously what the verse means to say, it is not what it actually says. Az Yashir The word Yashir is in the future tense. So what the words literally mean is, then Moshe and the Jewish people will sing this song in the future. Indicating, among other layers of meaning, it has several layers of meaning and several reasons why it's in the future tense, but indicating that this song, this prayer, will be prayed, will be sung in the future. And this is true in the sense that much later, our rabbis established, including Az Yashir, this praise, this song of praise in Psukei de Zimra, in the first section of our morning service. So every single day we say this. So Moshe's words are correct. Yes, they did sing it then for the first time, but Az Yashir, it will be sung every single day by the Jewish people who are davening Shachris, who are davening in the morning. We see it, we say it, we sing it every day. But Yashir, will sing, also means that this prayer becomes the model, the paradigm for every prayer. Az Yashir Moshe Az Yashir Azos, then this will be the song that is sung. This will be the model of prayer that will be prayed in the future. And this is true in several respects, which I want to review with you because they're very, very important, including the following verse, famous verse near the beginning of this prayer. Zekeli v'yamvehu. This is my God, and I will glorify him. Elokei avi v'aromemenu. The God of my father, and I will exalt him. Now, I want to suggest to you that that verse is the inspiration of the formula of what we say at the beginning of every single Amidah. Because we begin, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God. I'm going to come back to this phrase in a moment. Elokeinu ve'elokei avosenu. You are our God, and you're the God of our ancestors. So 2 points I want to make. Number one, Zeh, Keli, this is my God and I will glorify him. The word Zeh, Rashi says, the word Zeh, this, means it indicates something that you can point to. Zeh, this is, I can point to it. In our synagogue, in Ashkenazi synagogues, after the Torah reading, in Sephardi synagogues, before the Torah reading, we have Hagbah. We lift up the Torah scroll and we turn around so everybody can see the Torah scroll. And when we do that, we say the verse, Zos HaTorah, Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael. This is the Torah that Moshe placed before the Jewish people, Al Pi Hashem Biad Moshe, given by God through Moshe. Zos is another form of the word Zeh, means this scroll. This scroll right here in ADATH Israel on 223 Harrow Crescent is exactly the same words that God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. You could point to it. Zeh, Zos. This scroll, right here in our shul and in your shul, is exactly the same as the words God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, transmitted from generation to generation. That's it. It's directly from God, and you can point to it. That is why, by the way, you'll see in some places it's actually a Sephardic custom. Some people in Ashkenazi shuls do it. I don't know why they do it, but it's fine. I have no objection. But it's a Sephardic custom to point. They point because of this idea. Zos HaTorah, this is it. Rashi says that means something you can point to. Okay, you'll ask me, I see some people pointing with their pinky. I don't know why they point with their pinky and not this finger. That part I can't answer. But the idea of pointing is based on this Rashi, that when the word zeh or zos is used in the Torah, it means something you could point to. Okay, so we understand what it means about the Torah scroll. But in the Az Yashir, zeh keli, this is my God. This is my God, meaning, so to speak, I can point and say, this is my God. How is that possible? It's possible because Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea, is not only a successful escape, a way for the Jewish people who are facing danger to now be safe and secure and go on their way. Yes, it is that. It's not only a punishment of those who are trying to harm us, although yes, it is that, but it was a revelation of God's essence. It was a revelation of God's might. It was a revelation of God's caring and protection. It was a revelation, it was an encounter between God and the entire Jewish people, to the extent where every single Jewish person could say, Zeh Keli, I can see God. And since Az Yashir, since that prayer, every single prayer, every Amidah, every day begins by verbalizing Baruch Atah, blessed are you. Second person, I'm talking to you, God. I'm speaking directly to you. Every time we begin the Amidah, it is a moment of revelation. It is an encounter with God. That I am encountering God and God is encountering me. Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, God. How in the world do we have the chutzpah to say such a thing? Because Zeh Keli V'Anveyu. Zeh, this is my God. It's this line in this prayer that makes it possible, that allows us to begin our prayer. Baruch Atah Hashem. I'm talking to you directly, God, as if I could point to you. So that's the first necessary component of this formula. We must know when we pray what we are doing. We're not meditating. Yes, there is meditation and prayer, but when we start the Amidah, we're not meditating. We're not daydreaming. It is a moment of revelation. It is a moment of encounter with God. So how should we think about that encounter? I mean, logically, we can't comprehend God. We can't see God. We can't hear God. In what terms can we verbalize what God is to us? A number of scholars suggest, Sivan Rahav Meir is one of them, others, that we have to look at the full verse. Zeh Keli V'Anveyu, this is my God, I will glorify him. Elokei Avi V'Arom Mimenu, the God of my ancestors, I will exalt him. This verse expresses the appropriate relationship we should try to develop with God. On the one hand, Zeh Keli, this is my God. Every one of us must cultivate a personal, individual, unique relationship with God. I, Michael Whitman, I have a connection to God that is different than your connection. It's unique. I have my own way of relating, my own way of understanding, my own way of verbalizing, my own feelings of when this happens. And every single one of us must cultivate this. What is your personal connection to God? How do you personally feel? What does it do to you inside? What's going on inside of you? And on the other hand, but at the same time, this is the God of my ancestors. This is the God of my mother. This is the God of my father. This is the God of my grandparents. This is the God of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. We follow in their path. Our faith is based on their faith. Our actions are based on their actions. Our connection to God is based on their connection to God. So we can learn from their experience and we can continue along their path. Now, either one without the other is insufficient. And there are people who tend toward one or the other. There are people who focus more on their relationship with God as opposed to the transmission of this relationship from generation to generation. And then there are others that are just the opposite, who focus on the fact that they may not feel a personal connection, but this is what we've done. This is what our tradition is. This is what my heritage is. We need both. We must develop both. And that's the second component of this formula. Baruch atah Hashem. Blessed are you, God. I'm addressing God directly. You, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu. You're our God, and you're the God of our ancestors. And we need to develop both of those strands of the relationship. This ubiquitous formula with which we begin every prayer is rooted in the first communal prayer in the Torah, the prayer of Az Yashir. Az Yashir Moshe uvenei Yisrael Az Yashir Hazos Hashem. Then Moshe and the Jewish people will sing this song to God, a song of praise and thanks. Vayomru lemor, and they said, saying, Ashiru LaHashem ki go'ah go'ah. We sing to God, who is extremely mighty, who is very exalted. There appear to be two extra words. Vayomru lemor. What do those words actually mean? Az Yashir means they sang the song. They already sang the song. So what does Vayomru and they said lemor saying? What do those words even mean? So the Zohar says, I alluded to this before, the Zohar says that in each generation, we say it every day. Vayomru lemor means to say that they sang it, and Vayomru lemor, we will say it every single day. That's the indication, that's the source, that it's not just a one-time song, but we're saying it every single day. Vayomru, and they say, refers to us. We will say it. We will say it every day. And that means that we should say this prayer every day as if we ourselves are experiencing the splitting of the Red Sea and the crossing ourselves on dry land. And that's the source of our including it in our daily prayers of Psukei Zimra, as I mentioned before. But it's not only that we say this whole prayer in the Psukei Zimra, in the section at the beginning of the Shacharis prayer, because we also refer to this again just before we say the Amidah of Shacharis in the morning. In the words leading up to the Shacharis, Amidah, we say the following. V'yam suf bakata, you split the sea. V'zedim tibata, and the sinners you drowned. The sinners, the army was chasing after us, you drowned them. V'didim havarta, and your beloved ones, the Jewish people, you allowed to cross through on dry land into safety. Al zo shibchu ahuvim, and for this reason, those who love you will praise you. Moshe v'nei Yisrael l'cha anu shira b'simcha rabba. Moshe and the Jewish people sang to you a song with great joy, b'simcha rabbah, great joy. Can you imagine the joy of experiencing the splitting of the Red Sea and being saved from Paro's army and now being safe and secure on the other side? The amazing joy that they had. Az Moshe v'nei Yisrael l'cha shira b'simcha rabbah. And because of that, shira charasha shibchu geulim, with a new song, those people who had just been redeemed, just been freed from Egypt, praised you. L'shimcha al sfas hayam, they praised your name at the shore of the sea. That's the praise of Az Yashir. So we are recalling that the Jewish people sang the song of Az Yashir at being saved, and then we have the final bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, Go'al Yisrael, who saves Israel, who redeems Israel, and then we start the Amidah. So again, not only do we say the prayer Az Yashir, but we refer to it leading into the main prayer of the Amidah. And by the way, that's a lesson for us, that when we say the prayer Az Yashir, we should also say it b'simcha rabbah, with great joy, with great love, great rejoicing, as if we are experiencing it, as if it is happening to us. We should try to say it with that feeling. But this prayer of Az Yashir has a second function in the structure of prayer, because not only do we say the prayer, we refer to it just as we're about to begin the Amidah. And our sages explain the reason we do that is to be somech geula l'tefillah, to put in proximity, to put next to each other redemption to prayer. So just before we start the prayer of the Amidah, we have to mention redemption, Go'al Yisrael. And the redemption that we're referring to is the redemption of being saved by the splitting of the Red Sea. So we say the Az Yashir, and then we refer to it again before the Amidah. And by the way, you may know there's a rule that there can be no interruption between the Ga'ula, Baruch Atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael, and the Amidah. We don't even answer Amen. Even to answer Amen to someone else's bracha would be an interruption. It has to be in direct proximity. And this is a structural rule. The Amidah must follow redemption with a very important philosophical message. Because the exodus from Egypt, of which the splitting of the Red Sea is the climax, is the first time that God enters into history and changes the course of history. And what this event teaches us for all time is that God is involved on an ongoing basis in the lives of every single one of us. And that is what makes prayer possible. That there is a God who hears and who responds. Now, of course, we don't know what the response is often, most of the time. But without Az Yashir, without the splitting of the Red Sea, without knowing that God descends into history and changes the course of history when God decides to do it, prayer is meaningless. What's the point? Who am I talking to? Why am I asking for something? Only with the splitting of the Red Sea does it make sense to pray to God. And that's why it is a necessary component of prayer. It's necessary to the structure of prayer. The reference to the splitting of the Red Sea must be immediately followed by prayer. It's necessary to the content. Baruch atah Hashem. We're talking to you. And it's also necessary for the meaning of the prayer, the way we establish our relationship. Elokeinu ve'elokei avoseinu. That's why there can be no daylight between the splitting of the Red Sea and our prayers. Every time we make a request of God, every time we expect God to listen to our prayer and to respond, every time we praise, every time we thank, every time we expect a prayer to have meaning and significance, it is only because of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt generally, and Az Yashir, the splitting of the Red Sea in particular. And that's true on the macro level. God descended into history and changed the fate of the Jewish people, and God does that on an ongoing basis. We see it today. And it is true on a micro level for each of us as individuals. Az Yashir reminds us that no matter what we face, no matter what we do, it is possible through prayer to change the outcome. I'll finish with this, which I heard from Rabbi Melech Biederman. The Jewish people leave Egypt at the beginning of our portion. Paro and his army chase after them. The Jewish people look back. They see the Paro and his army are advancing towards them to kill them. They look forward. They see the sea. There's nowhere to go. And they turn to Moshe and they say, Moshe, why did you do this? Take us out of Egypt. And we'll just be buried here in the desert. We want to go back to Egypt. Everything you did is for nothing. There's no point to it. Let's go back to Egypt. Can you imagine such a terrible accusation against Moshe, such a lack of gratitude to God for the miracles that he performed, such a distortion of what actually had happened? Let's go back to Egypt. It'll be better for us there. Can you imagine? How could they speak like that? It's terrible. It's horrible. And that night was the splitting of the Red Sea. Our sages tell us, Ra Shivka al Hayam, Mashalo Ra Yechezka ben Buzi. Every single person, every single man, woman, and child had a revelation of God's essence and God's presence on the level of the greatest prophet. How could they reach such a lofty spiritual level on the same day as they started out so low, complaining to Moshe, ingratitude, distorting what had happened? Rabbi Biederman explains it's such an important lesson. And it's a lesson that's relevant to every single one of us. And that is, even after the worst mistake we can make, we can turn around and we can become the best. We can become the highest. Az Yashir is not just a beautiful single prayer. It is, but it's not just that. It is essential to our experience of prayer as a whole. It is what makes prayer possible. It is what makes change possible. It is what allows us to be able to get out from under whatever we have fallen into. And therefore, this prayer is certainly worthy to say with concentration, with exuberance, and with simcha rabbah, with abundant joy. My friends, I wish you a beautiful evening and a great Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.